Hey everybody, welcome to Garden Time with Belle. If you follow my channel, you probably recall a couple of videos ago, I published a video entitled The 5 Things I Wish I Had Known as a New Gardener. And I promised you all in that video that I would take each of those 5 things that I discussed and create a video, one video for each of those big categories of things to consider when you're starting out as a gardener. And that's just what today's video is all about. Today, we're going to tackle the first recommendation I have for newish gardeners, and that would be don't try to grow all the things. So before we get into talking about why it's a good idea not to try to grow all the things, I'm going to invite everybody out there to please like and subscribe to my channel. Doing that helps me reach more gardeners just like you. As I was putting together some notes that I wanted to help me stay focused as I was sharing some ideas with you all today, I thought, what would be easiest? What would be the easiest way to kind of, organize my thoughts? And that would be today. I want to talk to you about 2 main categories of growing, and that would be veggies and herbs and flowers. Both of those big categories of plants are very different in how we go about starting those plants, growing those plants, harvesting those plants. So I think they really belong in 2 separate groups. So that's what I'm after. And I hope it'll help keep us organized and help make the most sense for you all out there. So I am going to look at my notes because I've got some really great ideas in here that I don't want to forget that I want to share with you all. So let's get into it. So why should we try to avoid growing all the things? And when it comes to herbs and veggies, if we try to grow everything, gardening can become way too complicated and bring us way less joy than it should. If you just try to grow everything, it just gets too complicated. It gets to be a lot of work. And when it comes to growing every herb or veggie that looks wonderful in our the seed catalogs that we're all looking at right now, if we try to grow all those beautiful things, if you grow all those things, you're going to grow way more veggies and herbs than you can ever use. You're going to end up maybe wasting some things. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to waste veggies and herbs for sure. Unless you have a huge family that'll take all that extra produce, I would encourage you to really consider not growing too much. The other thing that happens when we grow too many veggies or herbs is that those plants end up competing for space in your garden. And I don't know about you, but I have 10 acres that I grow on. My veggies and herbs, I typically grow in my raised bed garden. And while I have 9 raised beds in my big garden, it's still never enough space. So I have to be really judicious and sort of selective about what I grow in that. If we pack our veggies and herbs too closely to cram every kind of thing in there or multiples of the same crop, those plants are going to end up competing for light, for water, and for nutrients. And that can be a difficult thing for our plants to handle. Every plant requires ongoing care, maintenance, and attention. And what do I mean by that? Well, all of our plants that we're going to try growing are going to need specific kinds of watering. They're going to need trimming and pruning. They're going to need regular feeding and fertilizing. We're going to have to manage pests and insects. They get into all kinds of veggie and herb crops no matter where you live. That's an ongoing thing that you have to manage all throughout the season. And of course, we have to manage the harvest. What do we do with all that produce? So those are reasons why I would have you consider not growing all the things when it comes to veggies and herbs. So how do we approach that then? When we're talking about herbs and veggies, I'm going to encourage you to avoid fussy and high maintenance plants. I'm going to encourage you to be very selective in what you choose to grow. And by that, I mean, choose vegetables and herbs that you absolutely love to eat or that your family likes to eat. You might want to consider growing the things in your garden that are hard to find in your area of the country, whether you're going to your grocery store for your veggies and fruit and herbs, or whether you're lucky enough to be nearby a farmer's market. So you might choose to limit what you grow to things that you don't readily see, varieties of tomatoes maybe that you don't have ready access to in your neck of the woods. So that's kind of the how to approach being selective and limiting the number of things you grow in terms of herbs and veggies. So we talked about the why we should limit how many things we're growing in our garden, how we need to go about doing that. And then now let's get to the what. What would be Belle's favorites? What are the herbs and veggies I would encourage newish gardeners to consider growing in their gardens? And we're going to break it down further into two categories. I want you to think about spring crops and summer crops. And depending upon where you live, you need to know when is your last average frost for your zip code. Just ask Professor Google, what's my last average frost here in this zip code? And it will tell you, it will give you a date. You need to know that date because before that date, it's safe to grow spring crops, things that do great with a little bit of frost and cold temperatures. And summer crops, you need to wait to plant those until after your last average frost. For me, in my mid-Missouri garden, my average last frost is around late April, but to give myself some extra security, I typically wait and not plant any of my summer crops until the first week of May. So know your average last frost. That will help you decide what should you plant in the spring versus the summer. All right, so spring, here are my favorite things for you to grow in your garden in the spring, and that would be salad greens. There are loads of different kinds of lettuce that you can grow. These are all things that you can direct sow. And direct sowing for you newer gardeners means you take the seed and you sprinkle it right in the garden bed directly where you want it to grow and you want to harvest your lettuce. Same thing, spinach. Spinach loves cold weather. It'll grow great in March and April here where I live. So direct sow some spinach seed. And last but not least, sugar snap peas are wonderful cold weather crops. And I put out my sugar snap pea seed in the first week of March. And it could still be frosty here and really cold, but sugar snap peas do really well in cool weather. All right, so once you've reached your average last frost, then it is safe to plant out your summer crops. And I'm going to recommend for newish gardeners that you plant tomatoes and peppers. And if you're new, you probably want to pick those up at your local nursery. Get the little tiny plants that are, 6 to 8, 10 inches tall, and those are what you're going to plant directly in the ground. However, even if you're new, I'm going to encourage you to grow green beans and cucumbers by seed. You're going to direct sow that green bean seed or cucumber seed right into your garden. The seeds are bigger, they're easy to handle, and they germinate really easily. So I really want you to grow your green bean plants and cucumber plants from seed. It's so much cheaper to do that than to let the nursery start those plants for you. And so you can grow your own green beans and cucumbers from seed. I'm going to give you a little bonus content on growing summer crops. And let's talk about the tomatoes I mentioned earlier. When you're a newish gardener, I would encourage you to consider growing tomatoes that are highly disease resistant. And a good nursery can tell you which ones are disease resistant in your neck of the woods, or a really good plant tag will also tell you they're highly disease resistant. Try those first. And then as you get comfortable and confident growing tomatoes, then you can branch out and try to grow heirloom varieties, which are less disease resistant, a little bit more care in growing those. But once you taste an heirloom tomato like a Cherokee Purple or a Brandywine or a Black Krim, you will never go back to growing hybrids. But starting out, I can't encourage you enough to grow disease resistant varieties like Celebrity. When it comes to green beans, I'm going to encourage you to consider growing either the bush variety. Bush variety are grown in bushes, a bush form. So they have a mounding habit. They're a little more difficult to harvest because you've got to really dig down deep and find all those hidden green beans. But a lot of people love the jade variety of green beans. So you want to check jade out if you want to grow a bushy type green bean. There's another type of green bean that you might consider growing, and that would be pole beans or climbing beans. That's my preferred method because when you plant pole beans or climbing green beans, they grow up a trellis and they take take up much less space in my garden so I can grow a lot of them. And one of my favorite types of green beans are the Seychelles variety of green beans. They are stringless. And you know, green beans, if you let them go too long, when you're snapping them or whatever, they have a string that gets caught in your teeth. No good. So look for the stringless varieties of green beans, the pole beans, and harvest them young and tender. Okay, well, we just covered herbs and veggies. So now let's get to the second big category of plants that we love to grow in our garden, and that would be flowers. So why should we be selective about not trying to grow all the flowers that we see in the magazines? And that is primarily because you want to plan ahead and being selective so that your flowers have plenty of space to grow and be healthy. Kind of applies to almost anything in the garden. We talked about herbs and veggies earlier. If you have a finite space in your garden, and I don't know many gardeners that don't have limited space, me included, even though I garden on 10 acres, I have so many pots, I have so many raised beds, I have so many garden beds around the house, but I still have a finite amount of space. And when you cram in too many flowers in a small space, your flowers are going to compete for sunlight, for moisture, and for food or fertilizer. So again, that is a really good reason to try to not overdo and cram too many things into a small space. Also, creating your plan for your flowers by limiting the numbers or types or colors is it will give your garden a more cohesive, attractive look. It just will. If you try to grow all the things, your eye doesn't know where to land. If you just have a million different varieties all crammed into the same spot, it can really be not as attractive as selecting just a few things to kind of combine together. So how are you going to do this? I'm going to encourage you newer gardeners to pick a color scheme and stick with it. And that would be 3 colors. And so when I say that, I don't mean your entire garden, your whole property can only have 3 colors of flowers. No way. Like I have 10 acres here. I have loads of different colors. However, when I'm considering the space I'm going to grow my flowers in, a particular area or space, I'm going to limit it to a tight palette of color. So in my hanging baskets this year, I've already decided, or not this year, next year, we're not in 2026 yet, but for 2026, my 2 hanging baskets that I hang on my back deck, they are going to be purple, blue, and yellow. I've already decided that, and I've decided exactly what type of plants are going to go into those 2 baskets. And in fact, I'll put a picture on the screen now. If you haven't been to the Proven Winners website, you need to go there and get some design ideas. If you really struggle, and a lot of us do, with how to combine different kinds of plants to produce a beautiful container, go to their website because you'll get loads of great ideas on what make good combinations. So 3 different colors, I'd limit it to that. When it comes to me growing my cut flowers, next year, I've decided to grow some brand new zinnias from Floret. I'll put a picture on the screen. I can't recall the variety right now that I ordered. I already ordered the seed, but I'm going to grow a new variety of zinnias and a new variety of celosia nearby them. Number one, because it'll look beautiful in my raised bed, but also when I go to harvest those cut flowers and create bouquets, I've got things that I know are going to go together. They're going to create a beautiful bouquet because they're in a similar color palette. I did the same thing with my dahlia order. I ordered, I think, 9 new dahlia tubers from Swan Island Dahlias. And for 2026, I decided the dahlias I'm going to grow, the new ones, in one raised bed. All of those dahlias coordinate to produce what I'm hoping are going to be beautiful fall bouquets. So I'm going outside of my comfort zone this next year, and I'm growing dahlias that are deep, deep burgundy, orange, yellow, rust colors, bronzes. Because for me, most of my dahlias, and I think for many of you, they don't really start pumping out beautiful flowers until late August and into September. And by that time, a lot of my other bright flowers are kind of on their way out, but my dahlias are really coming into their own. And so if I'm cutting those dahlias for floral bouquets that scream fall, I thought, yeah, let's do some dahlias in a color palette that screams fall. So what flowers would I encourage a newer gardener to grow? What are some of the easiest foolproof flowers? And here we go. So my favorite flowers to grow from seed are zinnias. Number one on the list. If you've never grown a zinnia in your life, please grow zinnias. The seeds are nice and big, and I'm going to encourage you to direct sow them. You don't need to start them in seed trays and all of that nonsense. Throw them in high quality soil in a spot that's going to get at least 6 hours of sun a day. 8 hours would be even better. And you will be rewarded with a bundle of flowers that are going to pump out blooms all summer long. Would also encourage you to grow marigolds. Grow marigolds from seed. Again, direct sow them right into the parts of your garden where you want those marigolds. You know, a lot of us think, oh, they're a throwaway flower. They're an old-fashioned flower. But actually, marigolds produce some really great smells that repel certain pests in your garden. So they're really a good thing to grow all around your veggies. And you all that follow my channel see that I have grown marigolds all throughout my garden. What I didn't mention before when we were talking about herbs is grow basil and parsley. Mrs. Meyer's Lemon's basil is the best basil you can grow in and amongst your veggies so that they repel a lot of unwanted pests and insect damage in your garden. So again, sorry I didn't mention that before. All right, back to flowers. So we said zinnias and marigolds from seed right into some high quality soil. Geraniums. If you're going to grow geraniums, I don't think they do great direct sowing, although some of you out there might have good success with that. I prefer to start my geraniums from seed in my seed cell trays and get some really decent size on them before you plant them into the garden. But if you're scared of seed starting, if that's something you're not willing to take on, totally get that. I was freaked out by seed starting when I was a new gardener. And so just go to your local nursery and pick up some of these gorgeous geraniums, and they grow great in pots. They grow equally well right in your flower beds. I weave my geraniums in amongst all my perennial beds around my house, and they do equally well in the ground or in a pot. We'll talk about how to care for all of these plants during the growing season. So when things finally start growing and I take you into my garden, that's when I'll tell you, how to prune them, how to feed them, and all of that. That's for future videos. But geraniums, you can't go wrong with this. Seed starting isn't for you, but you want flower power. You know what I'm going to say, those of you that follow my channel. If you are not finding proven winner variety annual flowers in your local nurseries, you need to put that on the top of your list. Talk to your local nurseries and ask them, can you please get in the proven winner flowers for us this year? They, in my neck of the woods, are very commonly found. Most nurseries, big box stores know what a great seller they are, how fantastic they are, and so they're finally getting in more and more varieties. If, though, you're very particular like I am, you can order these flowers online from lots of different places. I buy a lot of my proven winner flowers from Proven Winners Direct, but you just Google where can I buy Proven Winner annual flowers from online, and you will get a list of growers out there in the US. I always recommend, though, if you're going to get those flowers online, try to source them as close to where you live as possible, because they're going to be growing the Proven Winners varieties that do best in your location. So let me share with you my favorite Proven Winners annual flowers. And top of the list, Super Tunia petunias. One plant will get 3 to 4 feet in diameter, especially if you grow it in the ground. You can also grow them in pots. They will mound up and they will hang over and they will cover your entire pot. Proven Winners Super Tunia petunias, every color of the rainbow except I think for blue. They are magnificent. They are in every garden of mine every single season. I have 3 more plants from Proven Winners that you need to consider growing in your garden. They are foolproof. The next one on the list is Superbena. They're a verbena. They are super duper. They're like Super Tunias. They get huge, 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 huge. One plant, 2 to 3 feet wide in the ground, 2 foot wide in a basket. Check out Superbena. Third, Salvia and the Rockin' series of salvia. It's an annual. They are prolific bloomers. Pollinators love them. So the Rockin' series of salvia. And last but not least, Surefire begonias. They get enormous. And the thing that I love about Surefire begonias is they do equally well in sun or shade. And the last thing I want to make sure I share with you about annual flowers is that they require food. If you want them to pump out blooms all summer long, and that's their job really, is to start growing in May and then to die off at the first hard freeze, those are weeks and weeks and weeks that you want flower power. If you want continuous blooming for nearly all annual flowers, except for begonias, you want to make sure you are feeding them weekly. Food equals flowers. Just remember it that way. The more you give them food, the more flowers and a healthier plant you'll have. Use a water-soluble fertilizer on all of your annual flowers, and they will reward you with gorgeous blooms all summer long. So that's it. That was the how, why, and what of not trying to grow all the things, being selective in your choices for herbs, veggies, and flowers in your 2026 garden. And so before we wrap up, I thought for those of you that are going to be brave and try to grow some of these beautiful plants from seed, I thought I might share with you my favorite sources for seed, where I buy my seed from. And I think there are 5 on my list that I have used over and over again with great success. And that would be Johnny's seed, the M.I. Gardner seed, Baker Creek, Swallowtail, and Botanical Interest. Those are reliable seed companies that know what they're doing. And the most important thing is here we are, the very end of December. You need to be going online, or hopefully they've sent you some seed catalogs. Now is the time for you to order your seed, especially if you're going to order online. Now and in January, you want to make sure you have on hand what you're going to need for your 2026 garden, because some of these most popular varieties will sell out. So you don't want to be left with missing out on your most favorite varieties. What are you doing in winter? Most of us that garden in the Midwest, we're not out in our garden in winter. We're planning our gardening for the next year. So this is the time to do your wish list and to start ordering your seeds and your plants for next year. So I hope you found today's video helpful as we thought about trying to limit the number of things we're growing, to not try to grow all the things. And many of you that follow my channel, you're experienced gardeners out there. So please, in the comments, tell us what would be your top 3 flowers that you would grow. What are your most favorite veggies that are foolproof, that are easy to grow, that you have learned over the course of your gardening journey? Put those ideas in the comments so that we can share our advice and ideas with each other. I'm always learning from other gardeners. I hope what I'm bringing for the rest of you might give you some inspiration and new ways to think about your garden as well. So until next time, I wish everybody out there happy gardening. Ooh, doggies.